in the book. Okay. Okay, we'll start the recording now. Okay. Today's class number 2, but really it's sort of class number 1, because the first class was explaining what Devarim isn't. And the whole point of the first class was to explain what most people think the book is, simply can't be. We'll go back to that later on. What I want to do today is understand where the book sort of should begin. And we're going to study today primarily chapter 5, because that's the main section of the book where it begins. And only after we study chapter 5, we'll understand why there's a need for chapters 1 through 4. I'm not saying that the book should have started in chapter 5. I'm saying to understand chapters 1 through 4, you have to understand chapter 5. That's all. And therefore, instead of studying the book in order, I'm going to start with chapter 5, because the only way to explain chapters 1 through 4 is by first understanding chapter 5. Hope that's clear. A side goal today would be to understand davening also, and Shema, and we'll see a lot of things come through. So I'm going to share my source sheet. I hope Melissa can share. You don't need to have it with you now. Actually, I think I can share it on the chat even. I think I can share a file. Oh, yes. Okay, perfect. I forgot that this one I can share. Where are we? Class source sheets. Here we go. Time Devarim 2. And send. Okay, that was easy. So if you want to put it up on your computer, you can download it. It's on the chat. And we're going to get to work with a quick review. I can turn this off and we can share screen. Okay, and there we go. Okay, and that's fine. And screen sharing. So today, what's Sefer Devarim in Reitzin Chumash? I'm going to do a 2-minute review of what Chumash was up until Sefer Devarim. Breshit, in that show, is how and why God chose chooses a nation. We spent the whole year doing that, I think. Then we did Sefer Shemot, the process of becoming the nation, going down to Egypt, becoming enslaved in Egypt, redemption from Egypt, traveling to Har Sinai. The covenant in Har Sinai is going to be important for today's shir, because that'll be key. What I want to show you today, basically, is that the laws in Sefer Devarim belong right here in Chumash at Har Sinai. We'll explain it. After the covenant is broken and then reestablished, we need a symbol of the covenant, which will be the Mishkan. And then Ba'ikra is pretty much how to use the Mishkan. And then Bamidbar is how the first generation should have gone to Israel, how and why they failed, and how the new generation prepares for conquering the land. And now we get to Sefer Devarim, and last week's share was proving it's not a review of the first 4 books. I don't want to go through that again because I think we proved it quite good. And what it will be, what I want to show you is the main speech in Sefer Devarim is a set of laws the Moshe Rabbeinu received together with the 10 Commandments on the first 40 days. And basically, it's applying the concept of the covenant in Har Sinai to make it happen, basically to become a Goy Kadosh. God challenges us at Har Sinai that if you accept my covenant, you'll become a nation representing God. How to make that concept play itself out. In other words, I need a guidebook of how to turn a nation of slaves into a nation representing God. Sefer Devarim will be primarily a set of laws for the nation to keep. It will include also laws for individual behavior, but it will focus primarily on how to set up a nation serving God, and a lot of rebuke based on 40 years of experience of Moshe as the leader. So it will go through this over and over again because it sounds confusing. The laws of Sefer Devarim are 40 years old. They were given Har Sinai. The rebuke that Moshe gave us in Sefer Devarim is in the 40th year. Okay, now the main thing I want to do today is how, why, and where the laws in Devarim belong in Sefer Shemot. Got it? So I want to explain the logic behind the idea, and then I'm going to we'll simply read chapter 5 and study it nice and carefully. I'm going to stop the share, have a short discussion. I want to talk about a hierarchy of laws. Pretend you're starting a company, or I'll give a better example. Go back a couple years, and you're I'm used to teaching this to gap year students. So pretend you're gap year in Israel, and some camp director from some summer camp, some Shabbat camp in America is looking for counselors, okay, for staff. So they come, of course, they have to bring food, and they have a meeting, and the staff and the camp director presents, here's the goal of the camp. Right? We need counselors that are going to shape the future of the Jewish people. Because summertime, because they have nothing to do, give them a good fun program at camp, and we can brainwash them and turn them into what do you call dedicated religious Zionists who are going to come and shape and lead the future of the Jewish people for the next generation. And some 18-year-olds fall for it. Okay, I'm being sort of joking around, but actually, it's not brainwashing. It's called education. Now, let's say one of those students is convinced. Okay, I agree to this idea, and I want to be part of it. So they can tell the director coming, yes, I'm interested. The next thing they need to do is sign a contract. You're coming for camp. Right? No, you're employed. The contract is very general, saying, I'm the employee. You're the employee. I'm the employer. Here's the goal, and here's what your basic job is about. And then when they get to, then maybe what your salary is going to be, maybe some basic laws of the camp, etc., maybe the dates, whatever it might be. And then when you get to camp, probably the week before the campers come, you get a pre-camp session, but you get a set of laws for your specific job. So if you're working in, let's say, if you're a bunk counselor, you have to study the laws of how counselors take care of the kids in the bunk. If you're if you're a lifeguard, if you're working in the Cherocha, wherever it might be, you need a detailed set of laws of how the camp runs and what's your job in running the camp. Got the idea? But I'm going to, and I want to begin with an underlying concept, accepting a covenantal commitment. Then I need a contract, and then I need a set of detailed laws. Hope that's nice and clear. It's simply logical, straightforward. And once you understand that, you'll see exactly where Sefer Devarim fits in, right in the beginning of Sefer Shemot, or right in the middle of Sefer Shemot. Okay, so now I can, is that perfectly clear, I hope? That's key for understanding the book. Now we just have to see it inside.
Which part is Shmos?
We're going to read it right now.
No, which part of the analogy you gave?
Oh, I'm saying Shmot, getting out of Egypt is spending what do you call it? The whole experience of what do you call it? Of coming out of Egypt, redemption, all the experiences. Call that your gap year or whatever it might be. That's growing up. Taking the commitment to this God who took you out of Egypt, being committed to work for that God and serve Him, was being impressed by that God is going to motivate the people to enter a commitment. At Har Sinai, we're going to make a commitment to be God's people and sign a contract. Once I sign the contract, I need a detailed set of laws of how to fulfill the contract. Again, once we get to camp. Right now, we're in the desert. Understand? So you're going to have to travel to the land of Israel, conquer the land, and then set up camp. And when you get to camp, here's what your job's going to be. So the analogy works really nice for explaining the rest of Chumash, especially for 18-year-olds who are going to fall for it. Now, let's get back to work in Sefer Devarim. Sorry. Let me share my screen again, and let me just check the chat real fast. That's not the chat. Oh, that's not the chat. We don't need that. Okay. That's my WhatsApp. Okay, share screen and Matan Devarim too. Okay, move this to the side. Navigation. Okay. That's all the way up top. Is this? That's not good. That's the Word file. No, that's not good. Stop share. I shared the wrong screen. We need the PDF file. Here we are. Okay. Okay. So the logic of covenant, contract, detailed law system, we just explained that. And how to take that theme of the covenant and translate it into daily life. Now, in a set of laws, there'll be two basic types of laws. What I'd like to call ritual. The purpose of ritual in general is to remember your covenant, your commitment. In other words, people who are part of a or have committed to something, they usually need reminders of that commitment. And usually that'll be things like ritual. And then there are practical laws about how to get your job done, how to accomplish the goal. Now, like you might need to wear a camp uniform or camp sweatshirt Or you might need to wear if you're a B'nai Kiva, you need what's called a chutzat. I forgot what they call that chutzah. All the madruchim have a what's
Uniform.
the name of B'nai Kiva? What's it called? Tilboshet, yeah. Because it means you're a member of the staff. Call that big day kuna if you want. Okay, and then we need a set of detailed laws of how to act as an individual and also national behavior. Now, no, I want to get to the covenant, which we all know by heart, but listen carefully. We did this, we spent a lot of time on this when we studied Sefer Shemot. We get to Har Sinai, and we come to the mountain. Actually, I should do the I should really see the psukim inside. It might be a little bit easier. I'll share my screen, and I need my open up my Tanakh. Where's that going to be? Oh my gosh. Where are we going to find a Chumash? No, that's not good. Which one is my Chumash? Give me a second. Oh, here we are. Okay, I got my email open. That's a mistake. You don't need my email. You need a Chumash. Okay. Exodus chapter 19. Remember, we get to third month. We arrive in Israel. Arrive at Har Sinai, and we get to the mountain. Moshe goes up to God, and God tells him, "Here's what you tell the people of Israel. Listen carefully. Look what I did for you. Atem ritem asher sitem Mitzrayim. Look at these experiences you went through coming out of Egypt. All the miracles you saw, the great military victory, splitting the sea, the manna, everything. The punishment of the Egyptians and what I did to you. I brought you here on the wings of eagles and brought you to this place. And now, in light of all that, are you ready to make a commitment? Vatam. What's the conditions? Im shema tishbu. Are you willing to obey me? And are you willing to keep this covenant coming up called Brit Sinai? That will make you my special nation, even though I'm the God of all the nations. I'll follow Ibn Ezra's explanation. And if you accept that, then you'll be for me a priestly kingdom, meaning a kingdom, not just an individual representing God, but a nation representing God. And hence a Goy Kadosh, a nation separated to serve God. And that's the contract I gave you. Now, in light of that, the rest of chapter 19 was complicated. How God is going to deliver the contract, that was how close we are in Har Sinai and who does the talking and what the people hear. And then in chapter 20, we get what we call the 10 Commandments. That was in chapter 20. And remember, when the 10 Commandments are over, the people get real scared. Remember, the people see the theatrics and the lightning and the thunder, etc. And they tell Moshe Rabbeinu, we want you to speak to us. We want God to speak to us. And Moshe tells the people, don't be afraid. It's for your own good, all this fear. And the people stand at a distance, and Moshe goes up to get the rest of the words from God, and God gives them a whole set of laws called Parshat Mishpatim. Now, in Parshat Mishpatim, we get what's called a sampling of law. It's primarily laws between God and man, between man and man, but a couple of laws between God and God. We studied this in detail in Sefer Shemot. Now, let me stop this share for a minute. Just real quick, stop the share. From what you remember, where in Chumash do we find laws about day-to-day life? Nowadays we have like Shulchan Aruch that tells you how to live a Jewish life. Where in Chumash do I have a long set of laws that deal with basic, like an assortment of laws of day-to-day life? That the 10 Commandments are the contract. In Parshat Mishpatim, remember, is primarily laws about damages, basic court laws, etc., like that, freeing slaves, but in an ethical code at the end of it. Remember, there were 3 chapters of laws, a wide range of laws. Okay? Other than Parshat Mishpatim, where else do we have laws that are I think the word is melange, I think that's French, like an assortment of laws about day-to-day life?
All through Torah, all through the Torah, I would say.
So give me an example. After Parshat Mishpatim, where in Sefer Shemot do I have a set of laws about day-to-day life?
Would it be Chukim? I don't know. I don't know why that's in my head.
No, just give me an example of a set of
What
laws.
about kashrut? What about where are all the kosher, non-kosher animals?
Sefer Devarim.
Yeah, that's.
But I think Sefer Devarim Sefer
But
Devarim
before
mostly-
Devarim, I'm saying we're in Chumash. Before Devarim, do we have a set of laws about day-to-day life?
We
Well,
have
there's
in Pinchas,
definitely-
we have the Chagim, in Va'era,
right.
we have,
Right? It doesn't exist.
I'm saying in Parshat
Kedoshim-
Mishpatim, we have a
Kedoshim
wide
has
range
a
about how
bunch.
to act, like a whole assortment of laws. But in Sefer, the rest
Kedoshim.
of Sefer Shemot is about how to build the Mishkan, isn't it?
Right.
That's not
But in
day-to-day life.
Kedosh-
That's a
I
symbol
mean,
of
in
God.
Kedoshim you find it.
Yeah, in the middle of Vayikra and Doshim, we have a whole. Remember, Doshim too is different than the rest of Vayikra, isn't it? Everything else in Vayikra is very specific. How to bring, who has to bring a korban? When you bring a korban, it's how to use the temple. But it's not about day-to-day life, unless you spend your whole day in the temple. Maybe it's day-to-day life for the Kohanim, but it's not a guide for how you build your society.
but what about Chagim? Oh, what you mean? Well, society, if you're saying society, it draws me back to Mishpatim. If you're talking about individuals and observance and ritual,
Yeah, exactly. So you have Sefer Vayikra is a lot of ritual, but it's ritual to remember that you're God's people. Visiting the temple, we said, was remembering your commitment at Har Sinai. We spent when we did Vayikra, remember?
right? Yeah.
Talked about that in detail. So in the middle of Sefer Vayikra, I have one chapter about day-to-day life. Now, the law of Arayot is not about day-to-day life. That's like a warning of about an extreme. But the first half of Vayikra is all about who can come to the temple, who can't come to the temple, what you need to do when you become Tameh, becoming Tahor, and when you come to the temple, what you do, and how the priests bring the korbanot. After Kedoshim Tiyu, we have laws about what? About how priests act outside the temple in Parshat Amor. We have the holidays, which is pretty much the holidays in the temple, aren't they? It's what we do, what we do in the temple on the holiday. But it's basically it's a holiday cycle for sure. And then we have laws of Shemitah and Yovel. But it's a group of laws, but it's not law after law about day-to-day life. It's very different than Parshat Mishpatim. That's what I'm getting at. They're very specific laws and mostly Mishkan related. Now, Sefer Bamidbar has lots of stories, but very few laws about day-to-day life. We have laws that are temple related. Again, more laws about the holidays, but basically about the Korban Tamid that we bring in the temple. We have laws about Paraduma, Tumat Met. Remember, we have lots of laws that belong to Vayikra, Sota, Nazir, and things like that. But we don't find in Sefer Bamidbar a set of laws about day-to-day life. But I'm getting at the main book in Chumash that deals with laws about day-to-day life is Sefer Devarim.
Yeah.
Got my point? From chapters 5 to 26, it's the main book of Jewish law. And my key point I want to show you today, and I'm going to prove it by simply reading the book. Right? There's people could say 100 times it's Devarim's review of the first 4 books. We talked about this last week. It's simply not true. And we're going to read it and prove it. Now, I'm explaining logically what's behind it. We made a commitment to be a Memlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, a nation representing God. Now, how do I take that commitment and make it happen? I need an operating plan. I need a plan how to build a nation. I need laws of a central place. I need a laws of what? Of a judicial system. I need an economic system. I need a social justice system. I need to know how do you go to war and who goes to war and when you go to war, etc. I need law of leadership. I need laws for a Supreme Court. I need laws for a judicial system. I need laws. I need marriage laws, divorce laws. I need laws for the marketplace. I need, basically, I'm going to have I'll have laws of kashrut as well. Now, there's kashrut in Vayikra, but that relates to the temple. What makes you tameh? What makes you tahor? Someone who's tameh can't come to the temple. What makes you tameh? If you eat a non-kosher animal. I need the laws of non-kosher animals is in Vayikra relating to Tumah and Tara, not relating to keeping kosher. The laws of keeping kosher are what are the kosher animals that you can eat, not relating to the temple. That's stuck in Sefer Devarim. Now, my key point is, historically, the laws in Devarim were given first before the temple. And that's where everyone gets mixed up. I'm going to clarify it now. No, everyone thinks that Devarim comes last, and they ask how come there's a stira between Devarim and earlier books. It's the exact opposite. The laws in Devarim came first, together with the 10 Commandments. And they're before the sin of the golden calf. And Moshe reviews them, again, later, over and over again, we'll see. But the original set of laws, I call them a pristine set of laws, that Moshe teaches in Sefer Devarim, are laws that were given before Chet HaEgel, and that's before the second Luchot and before Midot HaRachamim. They don't relate to Midot HaRachamim. They don't relate to God's attributes of mercy. That's a different topic in relation to how God will punish or give us another chance. It's how God will reward and punish if we don't follow the contract properly. But the core laws of the contract, how to become a nation representing God, there's no reason to wait for the sin of the golden calf to teach them. They should come part and parcel with the contract. And therefore, the first set of laws we get immediately in Parshat Mishpatim on the same day. And then Moshe goes up, we'll see, for the first 40 days to get a much more detailed set of laws, which will guide our day-to-day life. Now, when Moshe comes down from Har Sinai, what should Moshe do? He should teach these laws, but he can't because of the sin of the golden calf. The rest of Sefer Shmot talks about how he broke the contract, right? How Moshe negotiates a new contract, and how God agrees to a new contract with Midot HaRachamim, and the symbol of the contract being the Mishkan, and maybe the rehab project. And then Vayikra, how to use the Mishkan. Now we're going to see in Sefer Shmot, Moshe teaches the laws that he received on the first 40 days. When he comes down with the second Luchot, we hear about that, but we don't hear the laws themselves. I'll have to probably say this 10 times until people get it straight. In other words, the people of Israel have heard the laws of Sefer Devarim hundreds of times. Because we'll see it's a set of laws that needs repetition. The reader of Chumash never saw them. That's a point that confuses everybody. And I want to try to make it clear today. So I'm going to go quickly and return to Sefer Shmot and see exactly where Sefer Devarim belongs. And then we'll see it in Sefer Devarim itself.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I understand Shemot and what happens and Vayikra. It's after we build everything and we go through lots of the laws regarding the Mishkan. And you said Bamidbar was mostly stories. How does Bamidbar, and I understand Devarim you say is a lot of laws. So how does Bamidbar fit in?
Bamidbar is a separate book of what should have happened. We should have left. We'll see this in the Parshim next week already. What should have happened by Midbar? We should have left Har Sinai, ready to go to war. We had the army ready. We begin our travel, and up until chapter 10, we're on our way to Mount Sinai. There's no more reason, once we leave Har Sinai, there's no need to give more laws. All the laws should have been taught. We had a whole year to learn all the laws. In the meantime, on the way to Har Sinai, we sin. Remember the Mitonim and Mitavim, and finally the Meraglim. And I need to understand why the first generation doesn't go in. Now, when we study Sefer Bamidbar, we show that as Sefer Bamidbar tells the story of how the first generation got ready, why they failed, and then later how in the 40th year, the new generation gets ready. For some reason, which we suggested several reasons for it, Chumash interrupts that ongoing narrative with laws that clearly belong to Sefer Vayikra. Remember, we went to like 4 or 5 times in Sefer Bamidbar. We have a set of laws that don't belong to Sefer Bamidbar. They're not part of the narrative. They don't belong with the narrative, but they're inserted in the narrative, even though clearly they belonged earlier in Sefer Vayikra. And we identify exactly where they do belong in Vayikra. Why Bamidbar does that? We suggested a reason, but we prove that's what Bamidbar does. Okay, that was unique to Bamidbar, but there's no laws in Bamidbar that relate to day-to-day life, of becoming a nation in the land. And we don't find laws in Bamidbar repeated in Sefer Devarim. Okay. When we get to Sefer Devarim, what are we going to find? We're going to find the set of laws that Moshe received on the first 40 days. And they're so important, these laws need constant repetition. Now, what I'm telling you, you refer to it every day when you say the Shema. But when we say the Shema every day, usually we haven't studied Sefer Devarim in detail. We don't appreciate what we're saying. But we'll see in a minute. Remember, are the laws of Sefer Devarim. We'll prove it. It'll take a second to prove. It'll take another 25 minutes to prove, to read it inside, but then you'll see how simple it is. Now, all I want to show you is that Moshe Rabbeinu, after Parshat Mishpatim, after the contract and the short set of laws, goes up for 40 days to get more laws. And that's going to be in chapter 24 in Sefer Shmot. We'll just review it one last time. Did I share my screen? I didn't share my screen. Share. And Where's my Chumash? Here we are. Okay. We go back to Sefer Devarim. We can make it a little bit smaller to make life easier. That doesn't help. That's not helping, I think. We'll leave it big. Shemot chapter 24. Actually, better keep it big. Okay. We said now Seven Nishma. When that happened, we can worry about later. But verse 12, listen carefully. Okay, chapter 24, verse 12. Just a review of Sefer Shemot. Vayomer Hashem and Moshe, Alei el Yahara, ve'yasham. God tells Moshe, come up the mountain, and listen carefully. Why is Moshe going up the mountain? Ve'tna lacha et luchot ha'even, va'torah va'mitzvah asher katabti l'rotam. Moshe is going up the mountain to receive the written contract, written in stone. This would be the first luchot, and a set of instructions and a set of commandments. Got it? The Torah and the mitzvah. I'll prove to you in next week's share, maybe in 2 weeks, that this word Torah is exactly the laws of Sefer Devarim. I think I prove it. I think beyond a shadow of a doubt. The Torah that this pasuk in Devarim is referring to is exactly the main speech in Sefer Devarim. Remember the famous V'zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe? Moshe is going up to get a set of instructions called the Torah, HaTorah with Hey idea, the Torah, and a set of commandments. What the mitzvahs we'll see as well, which God is writing down for Moshe to teach the people. Moshe goes up with Yeshua. He tells the people, now your babysitters are Aaron and Hor. We studied that with Chet HaEgel. Moshe goes up the mountain. Kvod Hashem, God's glory is on the mountain. Moshe goes up. The people see Moshe going to a cloud of smoke. That all relates to the story of Chet HaEgel later. And then Moshe is in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, during those 40 days and 40 nights, Moshe receives the Torah and the mitzvah. But in the meantime, we have the sin of the golden calf. Now, why Chumash records the laws of the Mishkan? We spent 2 months on that when we studied Sefer Shemot. Remember, Chumash was out of order, and we explained, remember Rashi's Shita and Ramban Shita. But the focus of Sefer Shemot is basically on the Mishkan from here on. That's why we need a Mishkan, why we need a temporary temple, but a temporary or a portable one. But the main thing that Moshe goes up on Har Sinai to receive is a set of laws. Now keep this story in mind because we'll see the same story in Sefer Devarim. Moshe will explain what happens when he goes up the mountain after the 10 Commandments. Now, when Moshe comes, in the meantime, Moshe comes down, breaks the luchot, renegotiates the contract, and in chapter 34, when he gets the new contract, just to refresh your memory, right? When Moshe came down, Vayid read it, Moshe, we're in chapter 34 now, verse 29. When Moshe came down with 2 luchot, when he comes down, remember Moshe's face was shining. Aaron and the people are all afraid because he's like, his view is too impressive. Moshe breaks ice with them. Remember, he calls them out. We studied this line when we explained how Sefer Vayikra begins. Okay? And then he breaks the ice with Aaron and the leadership. And then afterwards, Bnei Yisrael come and meet Moshe. And here's the most important line. Okay, we'll deal with this next week when we see the commentators on this verse. But what does Moshe command the people? Everything that God taught him on Har Sinai, which is everything he learned on the first 40 days and the second 40 days. What God taught Moshe on the first 40 days, he couldn't teach until we reestablished the covenant. Now they came down and God's willing to reestablish the covenant. We remain God's people, even though we're a stiff-necked people. Now Moshe has to teach these laws. So Chumash tells us that Moshe taught the people these laws when he came down with the second luchot, as they're building the Mishkan. But Chumash never tells us in Sefer Shemot what those laws were. It just says that Moshe would speak to them, put a mask on, take his mask off. I'm going back and forth, but Chumash is telling us in Sefer Shemot that Moshe taught the laws, but doesn't tell us what the laws are. We're going to find out what these laws were in Sefer Devarim. Okay? Now we're ready to see chapter 5. Hope that was clear. When we reach chapter 5, you see how simple it'll be. Now, let me share my screen and go back to our source sheet. Okay. Now, so I explained the only time we have units of laws, an assortment of laws in Chumash is Parshat Mishpatim, which we said was a sampling of Jewish law, primarily damages, and that basic ethics of behavior. Vayikra 19, Parshat Kedoshim Tiyu, and we explained why it's inserted in Vayikra, because it probably belonged in Har Sinai. Remember, the Vayikra 19 is all the Dibrot, but it's called Toledot. applications of these wrote in day-to-day life. And the main set of laws will be Sefer Devarim. That's it, right? But how to become a God, how to become a nation representing God, or Goy Kadosh. Okay, then we talked about the chronological order. Basically, if I follow chronologically when the mitzvot were given, we entered a covenant in Har Sinai. God had the contract that he brought. We got the laws of Parshat Mishpatim that day, and the laws in Sefer Devarim on the first 40 days. That's explicit in Chumash, and we'll see that now outside. In the meantime, that all these laws of Devarim were given before the sin of the golden calf. Okay, now we're going to read chapter 5 to prove it. And we read Shemot 24:12 and 34. That's what we just read. It should be 34 down 32. Those are the keep sukim that we just read before, in case you want to look it up later. Now let's see chapter 5, okay? Now, again, I'm going to pretend the book began in chapter 5. Later we'll see why I need the first 4 chapters. But let's pretend the book began right here. The narrator of Chumash tells us, Vayikra Moshe kol Yisrael vayomer lehem. Moshe calls all of Israel and tells them. Now, if you were my students in class and we had a couple hours, I would tell you, we need here a quotation mark. Moshe starts speaking. Remember? Moshe is speaking now in first person. Shema Yisrael chukim b'mishpatim asher anochi dover b'osnechem hayom. We'll return to this pasuk in a minute. But Moshe is speaking now in first person. That's clear. I could ask you, keep on reading until Moshe finishes talking. I'm going to stop the share for a second. Do you understand what you would have to do to be a good student? I would start reading chapter 5, verse 1. I put a quotation mark with Moshe's opening line. Listen, everybody, to us, I'm teaching you. And I want to find, where does Moshe finish talking? Where do I close the quotation mark? What?
Almost at the end.
Almost at the end of the book. It goes on for over some 20 chapters. We'll see exactly where it ends, and we'll see how the end of the speech will explain the beginning of the speech perfectly. We'll spend a whole share on that, on the end of the speech. But if you really want to appreciate it, if you're bored one day, just simply scan through the whole speech and note that Moshe doesn't stop talking. Now, people don't notice that because of Parshat Shavua, because no one sits back and reads all Sefer Devarim unless they do it Hoshana Rabbah, which is nice minhag on Hoshana Rabbah. But then you're so busy finishing, you're in Daf Yomi mode, where the goal is to finish and not study. Because you want to finish the Daf or finish them when you're doing, as opposed to studying and reading it and paying attention to it. But if I read the book from chapter 5 and listen to Moshe's speech, he doesn't stop talking until, we'll see later in the middle of Parshat Kitavo, some over 20 chapters. Exactly where it is, I'll leave in case you want to look for it on your own. I'll let you discover that on your own in preparation for next week's share. I'll give you a set of questions like I did last week if you want some guided questions to do it on your own. Now,
it's interesting, excuse me.
Yeah, sure, go ahead, Cheryl.
That Moshe doesn't stop talking when Moshe's excuse in the beginning was Aral Sfatayim Ani.
More than that, Moshe says, Lo ish devarim anochi. That's
Yeah.
one of the biggest ironies of the Bible, or probably sarcasm of the Bible. Where Moshe says, I'm not a man of, but he says, Lo ish devarim anochi. And Moshe, in Sefer Devarim, doesn't stop talking. Now, what's he mean by Lo ish devarim anochi? Does it mean he doesn't want to talk? Or he's not. I think he means I'm not the man to represent. It's I'm not a politician. I'm not the man to go to Pharaoh and speak on behalf of the people. Or is Devarim, by the way, does the word Devarim mean rebuke or words? I'm not the person to rebuke. That's how Rashi understands it. And he has a good reason, because he didn't suffer in slavery. So Moshe is saying, I'm not the one to represent the Jewish people because I didn't suffer with them. Send someone who's been with them. Or send a natural leader. I'm not their natural leader, but that's a class in Sefer Shemot. Now, okay, so let's read now chapter 5. And let's listen, just pay attention to the words. Now, there's a rule of thumb you might have learned back in high school whenever you learn how to write a speech, or all the classic mistakes. Remember, what's the first mistake when you give a speech? Right? Never start with what you're not going to talk about. Okay? Just listen sometimes when people don't know that, when they get up to give a speech. If they start saying, I was going to talk about this, I decided not to, or they give like something not related, just like some introduction, you lose people in a minute. The first thing you say what you're going to say, but don't make it boring. Make it interesting. In other words, talk about your opening statement has to relate to what your topic's going to be. You don't summarize what you say in the beginning, but you open up with a question or with an introduction or some statement that'll get the people thinking that relates to what's coming up. And therefore, every speech has three parts. Say what you're going to say, then say it, and then say what you said. Now, if you have a lot to say, then the introduction is very short, and the summary is very short, and the middle is long. If you're a rabbi giving a speech in shul and don't have much to say, so your introduction is 10 minutes, and your conclusion is 10 minutes, and your speech is 1 minute. Understand? I'm making fun of shul rabbis, all my buddies. I'm just joking, okay? But you know exactly what I mean, don't you? Sometimes you have notes. If you can summarize the speech in 2 minutes, and the speech was a half hour, then he's a good speaker, but the content was minimal. But sometimes people want to hear interesting stories, want to be entertained. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to read the first line of the speech to figure out what the speech is about. Okay? So let's share our screen. The Hebrew here is super simple, so there's no reason to have Hebrew English, but I have it formatted to help us follow the share, and I hope this is the right file. Oh my gosh, here we go. That should be it. Oh, share, here we go. Okay. So Moshe calls them all together and tells them the following. Oh, okay, that's good, and that's good. Shema Yisrael, he has to wake them up before they start. To the Chugim Mishpatim that I'm commanding you today, and here's what's important. Words, listen up, everybody. I'm teaching you, remember this phrase, Chukim and Mishpatim. It's going to come up a lot. Okay? Remember, Mishpatim, which I'm commanding you. I'm putting in your ears. What do you have to do with them? You have to study them and keep them. Now, that's core to Jewish law. Jewish law is not simply laws that have to be kept, they have to be studied. Who can explain me why? What's the difference between a set of laws you have to keep and a set of laws that needs to be studied? Just give me from your experience in Jewish law and study. Right? If there's a text you need to study, okay, then what's that? What do you do? What does that study lead to?
Standing, hopefully.
Yeah,
A closer adherence, an internalizing of the message behind it. It should serve as a guidepost, not only for that specific thing, but for, it has ramifications in all your behavior.
That's right. Because what's going to happen to become a nation forever, I'm going to have to take these laws and turn them into principles and apply them in every future generation. So I can't read the laws like a robot and say, follow these laws. It's not an IKEA guidebook how to build something, which is complicated enough. It's not a detailed instruction book. Rather, it's a guidebook, and therefore the laws have to be studied. And I might find a law like Egla Rufa. Maybe Egla Rufa. I might find a law like Ben Sorel Moreh or like Ir Nidachad, which might not be a practical law, but when I study that law, I'll derive a principle and something from it. That's exactly what the rabbis do, don't they? Therefore, the laws I'm teaching you, it's not a practical guide, do exactly A, B, C, D, but rather it's a set of laws that need study, right, and application, and keep them. And remember that these laws need to be studied, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's for sure what the rabbis did. Because Chumash can say 7 times you have to eat matzah for 7 days, and the rabbis say you don't have to. I think we discussed that in Shemot, didn't we? No, but that's because they studied Chumash and didn't just read Chumash. And sometimes the rabbis would say, put this guy to death, and the rabbis would say, you never do things like that. You learn Mesechet Sanhedrin. So if I just followed Sefer Devarim literally, I'd be executing people, 24/7. But we don't do that. But maybe the guy deserves to die. But we don't actually do it. We'll see. We'll apply that when we study the laws of Arei Miklat. No, back to Sefer Devarim. So the first thing that Moshe tells the people is, listen up, everybody. I'm going to give you a set of laws you have to study and keep. Now, if you were there, remember, it's 40 years later after the laws were given, and this leader now, who's about to die, is gathering the people together, teaching them a set of laws, and saying, I'm going to teach you a set of laws that you have to keep. Think like a teenager, what's in the back of their mind?
Rebellion.
What?
Rebellion.
Before the rebellion, give me a reason for the rebellion. Right? Who does he think he is? Moshe Rabbeinu? That was supposed to be a joke. In other words, under what authority is Moshe telling them what to do? If someone tells you you need to do A, B, C, D, right? Who do you think you are? Who made you? Who put you in charge? Why are you?
But
What?
hasn't Moshe been teaching it the whole 40 years?
Yeah, okay, but things have been on the back burner. We'll see why for 38 years, because ever since Chetam Raglim, we'll deal with that in the first speech. The laws that he's talking about are going to apply to entering the land of Israel and settling and establishing a nation. They've been on a holding pattern for 38 years. That'll explain the first speech. The first speech has to explain these laws were very relevant 40 years ago. Listen, you'll hear a lot of times, oh, Devarim, the laws in Devarim are different because they're about to enter the land of Israel. But that was true 40 years ago. The laws about what to do when you enter the land of Israel apply 40 years ago when we got to Torah and Har Sinai. They were put on a back burner because of all the sins in the desert. But the original set of laws of what to do when you come and conquer the land of Israel and set up a nation, they were given at Har Sinai, and they should be given in Har Sinai. Now, they were on the back burner for 38 years because of all the sins. Now they're relevant again. Why? Because they're about to go in. There's a new generation. Hopefully they learn from the mistakes of the first generation if they studied Sefer Bamidbar properly and studied Tilim Ayin Chet. Remember, I think we'll deal with Tilim Ayin Chet later on. But they were supposed to learn from the sins of the first generation. They shouldn't be like, remember the generation of the parents, the Dor Sorel Moreh, the door that wasn't ready for redemption and getting the job done. Now they're ready to go in. Now they need to learn the set of laws that they received, that their parents received 40 years ago, and now it's relevant for them. And we'll see these laws will need constant repetition. Now, under whose authority do we have to keep these laws? You tell me.
It's a good question because it could be on the one hand Moshe, who has spent all his time with the nation, or it could be the leader that's going to take over from Moshe.
But okay, but
Ultimately,
I'm asking you a more basic question.
Hashem,
Yeah, what gives Moshe the right to tell them what to do? What do you mean by Hashem, Rashi?
that Hashem is giving him the authority. Moshe wouldn't be the leader if Hashem didn't appoint him.
Okay, and where does it say that? In the speech right now in chapter 5. That's my whole point. Now, the first thing Moshe is going to say, you signed a contract 40 years ago. Right? These laws are part of a contract. Look at the next line, it's key. The first line of the speech, Moshe is right on the spot. He says, listen up, everybody. There's a set of rules I'm teaching you, and you're obligated because you made a commitment. Now, if someone told you that, what would you answer if it's the 40th year?
We didn't make
Did
it.
I make a
We did
commitment?
it 40 years ago.
That was told 40 years ago. That was my parents. Now, listen how this explains the first lines of the speech to the T. Here are we? Okay, what's it say? Hashem Elokeinu karati manu brit b'chorev. Remember this phrase, Hashem Elokeinu? You say it every day. Okay. Remember Hashem Elokeinu? We say it in Shema. Hashem Elokeinu means Hashem, our boss, our covenantal partner. Here's my proof. Hashem Elokeinu is the God we entered a covenant with. Chorev is Har Sinai, right? First thing Moshe says, the laws I'm teaching you are part of a commitment you made at the covenant at Har Sinai. Remember I told you covenant precedes the laws. These laws are part of the covenant and their application of the covenant that you made at Har Sinai. And don't think for a minute that was your parents. Okay? Lo avotenu, that commitment wasn't only a commitment between your parents and God, but with whom? There's this kritat brit. This brit that I'm going to review again now. That brit applies to us as well. The people survived the desert, meaning it was a brit between God and a nation, not God and individuals. It was a brit between God and a people, capital P, and not God and a people, small p, if I have my grammar correct. God didn't make a commitment, a contract with individual people. He made a contract with a people, capital P, with a nation. And you're part of that nation. You survived the 40 years in the desert, and that contract was with you. Even though you didn't sign it, you were there. Everyone knows the Midrash. We all said Nasa Benishma. This is a verse that supports it. Moshe is telling the people, you made a contract. The people of Israel made a contract. You're part of that people. It wasn't only with your parents. all the Parshim say, Lo tavotenu bilvad. They had the word right here, bilvad. It wasn't only with your parents, God made that contract, but with you as well. Okay. Now, if it's a contract between God and the people, who should be talking to the people? Let God himself do the talking. So Moshe says, indeed, panim b'fanim diber Hashem bahar b'toch ha'esh. God spoke to you directly that contract, and God should be telling you the laws directly. But what happened? I became the middleman, Moshe says. I was the middleman between you and God that time to tell you the words of God. Why? Because you got scared and you didn't go up the mountain. Now, Moshe is explaining why he's doing the teaching and not God himself. Because what Moshe say? You're the one who requested that I be the middleman. Remember someone, I forgot, I think one of you mentioned, under what authority is Moshe teaching them? Who gave Moshe the authority? I think Miriam brought up the question, or that did God appoint Moshe to be the middleman? We can see in a minute, it was the people's idea. Moshe is going to remind the people now, you were the ones who requested that I become the middleman. Ideally, God should teach you these laws directly because these are God's laws. I became the middleman. I'm teaching you the laws because that's what you asked for, because you got scared. Then, I purposely, then he quotes the contract. See that? I'm purposely skipping the contract because we had that in Sefer Shemot. He quotes the contract. That's the Brit, which we made in Har Sinai. And then he tells the story of what happened next. So these statements, remember Sefer Devarim? These statements, God spoke to you directly. You, the whole nation, heard these words from the fire, and it was really scary. Remember, there was fire and brimstone, fire and smoke, remember? Loud noise, everything. They didn't stop. And these were the words that you heard God speak to you is what were written on those Luchot HaEvan. Remember, Moshe goes up to get Luchot HaEvan, the Torah and the Mitzvah. So they weren't written right away. Remember, that's what we heard at Har Sinai. And they were written later on the tablets that later Moshe is going to break, but the tablets he receives on Har Sinai when he goes up for the first 40 days. Now Moshe is going to tell the story of why he's teaching the laws and not God himself. What happened? You heard God's voice from the darkness, and the mountain was full of fire. Okay? And then all your leaders came to me, your leadership came, and like they're Jewish, they complain. What do they complain about? Pay attention to the phrase again, Hashem Elokeinu. Batumru, Hein heranu Hashem Elokeinu, et kvodo vet godlo, vet kolo shomanu mitoch ha'esh, hayom azarinu ki yidaber Elohim, adam b'chai. Moshe, we're believers. We're in on this now. Boy, are we convinced. This is called theophany. This experience was way too intense. We got the point. We saw God's glory. We heard his voice. Right? And boy, we saw that God indeed can talk to man. God exists. He talks to us, etc. But any more of this, we're going to die. Another minute of Har Sinai, it's too much for us. It's too intense. Okay? If we continue hearing God's voice, right, we're going to die. Right? It's simply not human to be able to hear God speak directly. You understand what the people are saying? This direct connection to God, it's too intense for humans, for simple mortals. It would be much better if we had a Rabbi. Got it? Then Moshe, he tells it, Kravataushma. The people tell Moshe Rabbeinu, you go up. You're a superhuman. Okay? You're an Ish Elohim, we'll see. You go up and you listen to all the words of God. Of who? Of Hashem Elokeinu. Asher Kratamanu Brit B'chorev. Got it? See what's happening?
Leibtag, can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, Shoshana.
Why was this not considered a chet?
Why was that? What do you mean by a chet?
That it's kind of a rejection on the part of Bnei Israel. It's kind of a rejection of the intimate relationship that Hashem intended to have with us.
So your question, Shoshana, is a machloket between Moshe Rabbeinu and God. Okay?
Yeah.
Because in Sefer Shemot, when the people complain, Moshe says, bad idea. Stay with it, right? Be a man, right? we'll see in a minute, God says, great idea.
Uh-huh,
Because
uh-huh.
God wanted it to happen. Sometimes, like you scare people, like a good listen, I'll make what do you call a Rosh Yeshiva joke, okay? A good Rosh
Yeah.
Yeshiva doesn't want Talmidim bothering him 24/7. They want every 2 minutes another guy coming. So if a Talmid comes with a question, the Rebbe will tear the guy apart. Why can't you read this on your own? Why didn't you? Why are you coming to me on stupid things? Come to me with something serious.
Uh-huh.
I can make meeting some big rabbi. I can make it so scary that they're afraid to come again, unless they're really prepared. In other words, I can create an environment that's so fearful that you're afraid. No, you could ask the Rebbe a question, but if I didn't study the sugya properly, I'm afraid to go near because I don't want to be embarrassed. You follow?
Yes, but
I'm sharing with you a life experience.
right, right.
I'm talking about knowing myself, but half the yeshiva when
Oh my God.
we had a great Rosh Yeshiva, but
Yeah,
if you asked him, if you weren't prepared, people were just afraid.
right.
Now he didn't mind if people came, but there was a certain fear, like what's called in Hebrew, it's called a distance.
Yeah,
It's
of
like in the
course.
army.
You have it in the tzava also, yeah.
If you got to go to your commander, in basic training,
Right.
you keep your distance. It's called distance, and you don't just run into your parents. You basically have to build respect. Now, but listen what happened now. But the people's request is logical, isn't it? Okay. It could be, you simply see, they're human, aren't they? I call it the Yom Kippur syndrome. Yom Kippur, awesome, right? One day, every day Yom Kippur, forget it. Understand? You can handle one day of Yom Kippur. You handle maybe a certain tshuva. All year long, leave me alone. We're human. You can't do that every day. It's a nice one-time experience. You might want to relive it once every 7 years or so. But you can't live that day to day because we're human. Okay. God heard the words. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I heard what the people say. They do. You know what? This is great. I got them right where I want them. Listen what God says now to Moshe. Mi'itain. That's a saying in modern Hebrew, right? Mi'itain. It's called halavai. Mi'itain. Vayalavam zeh lira'oti lishmor et kol mitzvotai kol yibim lemani tablem livnei la'olam. They should always be so fearful of me. And this distance, and this fear is very healthy for them. Right? They should know that God is distant and they have to have fear, and they need a middleman, a Rabbi in between. So God says, their request is exactly what I wanted to happen. By the way, Shoshan, your question goes back to Gan Eden. Like, did God want man to sin in Gan Eden? Or was that part of the growing up process? I think in previous year, I was eavesdropping at the end of this year. I don't know if you were participating in that previous year.
Yeah, I was there.
Okay. So that idea is Gan Eden. Did man sin, or God wanted man to sin because we're not supposed to live in Gan Eden. We can strive for Gan Eden, but we live b'olam hazeh. But to appreciate why we don't belong there, we need the story of Gan Eden. It's like a child growing up. It's part of growing up to have to learn the hard way. But that's a philosophical discussion. Now, this is the key to the book now. Lechem or lehem, shuvat lechem lechem. Moshe is telling the story of what happened 40 years ago on Har Sinai, when the people got scared after they heard the Ten Commandments, and they were at the theophany and they got scared. And they begged Moshe Rabbeinu that you be the middleman. And they say again, Nasa v'nishma now to V'shemanu v'asinu, to remember Nasa v'nishma, now Nishma v'naseh. Whatever you tell us in God's name, we'll keep. And whatever you tell us, it's so God told us. Okay? Now, and therefore God said, great idea. Tell the people to go back to their tents. Got it? Listen carefully. God told Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's what Moshe is telling the people now. You stay with me here on Har Sinai. V'adabra elecha, I'm going to tell you, et kol ha-mitzvah, remember these words, and the chukim mishpatim, which you have to teach them, and they'll keep in the land that they're going now to possess. We should have gone right away. But once we left Egypt and got to Har Sinai, made a commitment, there's no reason to stay in the desert for even a couple months. We should get the Torah and go right to Israel and become a nation. That's why we left Egypt. I needed to go to get to Har Sinai to enter a contract. That took several weeks. But once we make that contract and we're ready to be God's people, there's no reason to hang out in the desert. I don't need to build a Mishkan. I don't need to build a temporary temple. We'll see. I'll need a permanent temple. You see where we're going? Sefer Devarim will talk about a permanent temple, not about a portable one. And that'll explain that we use that to explain the Machlokes Rashi and Ramban about the laws of the Mishkan. Our claim was that the laws in Devarim came before the Mishkan. They talk about the concept of a temple, a permanent temple, which later becomes Yerushalayim. Because of the sin of the golden calf, I need to build a portable one and a temporary one until we get to Israel because of the bad behavior. But ideally, we should have gone in right away. And the laws in Devarim represent the ideal before the sin of the golden calf. And therefore, it doesn't talk about a Mishkan, it talks about a Mikdash. Now,
Something.
yeah, Rashi?
Yes. How does Torah Shabbat Peh fit in with this?
We'll get to that in a minute, okay?
Okay.
I mean, not in a minute, about 5 minutes.
Okay.
According to the rabbis, Moshe receives at this time Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. That's why it takes 40 days, because I could do the speech, in a couple of days. But together with speech comes a lot of laws that apply with it, which makes sense. Now, the question is going to be, Moshe receives all these laws in Har Sinai, but what happens? Only some of them are recorded. Some of them were passed on, but verbally. Got it? So the question the question is, why are some laws written, some laws are not written? That becomes okay. And when we say Torah Shabbat Peh, what's that meaning? It doesn't mean that everything that Rabbi wrote in the Mishnah, God told Moshe on Har Sinai. The Rambam talks about that. That what's called Halacha Moshe Sinai is on like the 4 parshot of Tefillin. That's certain laws that are a tradition. But how those original laws turned into the Mishnah, that's a whole long historical process. But a lot of core laws that aren't recorded in Chumash were given to Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's called Halacha Moshe Sinai, which the Rambam claims can't have a machloket on. But that's a whole, that's a class into what's called Toshba, development of Toshba. Now, but again, let's go back again. God told Moshe Rabbeinu, you stay here with me, and I'm going to tell you the mitzvah and the chukim shpatim that you have to teach them, and they'll keep in the land they're going now to possess. Now, look at that line again, and look how it relates to the introduction. Go back to the first line of the speech. What did Moshe say? Shema Yisrael to the chukim and mishpatim. See that? Which I'm commanding you today, and learn them and keep them. And these laws are part of a brit you made with God. Then Moshe said, here's the brit you made. And after the brit, you made that commitment. You got scared and begged me to be the middleman. And therefore, why am I teaching the laws? Because that's what you begged for. And therefore, God told me on Har Sinai, this commandment, remember the word mitzvah? Remember Moshe goes up to get the Torah on the mitzvah? We'll identify later the mitzvah. And the chukim mishpatim, which we'll see will be the Torah. That'll be the Torah and the mitzvah of Sefer Shemot. But God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, we'll spend weeks on this and identify what the mitzvah section is, what the chukim mishpatim section is. It'll be super clear once we study the speech. But Moshe's job is to teach these laws, and to be able to study them. And these laws have to be applied as you come in the land of Israel, which you're going down to possess to become a Mamlechet Kohanim B'Goy Kadosh. Got it? Now he finished the story. Got it? He finished the story of the laws he's about to teach, how they came about. Now he's going to throw in a little mussar of his own. What's he going to say? That's what happened. And now Moshe tells the people, you better keep these laws I'm about to teach you. Ushmartem la'asot. You have to keep them, to do them. Which Hashem Elokechem. Remember Hashem Elokeinu? It's Hashem your God has commanded you. Okay? Don't go left and right. No, it's follow the laws. Don't change things. Okay? Follow the way which God, Hashem your God, is commanding you. To be worthy of what? Of staying alive and living in the land and not being exiled, we'll see. This is arichut yamim, not of the individual, but rather of the nation. If you want to stay alive as a nation and have a good land and prosper in the land of Israel and stay there for a long time and not be exiled, you better follow these laws. Moshe is going to repeat this over and over again through the speech. Arichut yamim in Devarim is arichut yamim of the nation, not the individual. And if Acher knew that, he'd still be from. You know the Medrash about Acher? You've heard of Acher, the big kofer? Remember?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, remember he saw the Kansi poor guy?
Right.
And they, and then the guy died. Yeah, and they says, no, Chumash says you keep this law and you'll live a long time, and the guy dies right away. So he understood it as individual schar as opposed to national schar. Right, that's a topic for later. Now, with that background, what if you were listening to this speech? What would you want to know now? Right?
Rabbi Leibtag, who says
Yeah.
that? It's the first time I'm hearing that. I think it's a very good thing to say, but
About
where's, who says that?
Moshe
About
Rabbeinu.
Achar.
Oh, I do. Okay, that's my line. I didn't see anywhere, but that's the way I teach Acher. No, it's if you want to, that's the answer for Acher. I don't think the Gemara ever gives an answer why, what was wrong with this answer, other than like they leave it as a philosophical question. But I think the answer is if you follow Moshe Rabbeinu in his speech, Arichut Yamim, all through the speech is national. Is up. If I have a minute, I'll show you later on in a minute where Moshe says it explicitly. In chapter 4, he says, "You better keep these laws, because if you don't keep the laws, lo tarichun yamim aleh, and you'll be sent into exile." But Arichut Yamim is in contrast to exile.
How does Kibbutz Avim fit into that?
It does. Kibbutz Avim. Arichut Yamim Kibbutz. It's not for Kibbutz Avim. It's on the contract. Okay. Listen, Arichut Yamim Kibbutz is the end of the first section of the Ten Commandments between God and man. Right? The man Rabbi Menachem is not on Kibbutz Avim. It's on Anochi Hashem Elokecha until Kibbutz Avim. You're saying the question. Remember when you diagramming a sentence? The question. The man is going on the commandment of the fifth commandment, or is it talking on the whole first five? Now, what happens after the first five? Then we get the short ones, lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, etc. That's the negative ones. But the positive ones end with the man yuchun yamecha. But it's going on the entire contract of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Now, remember how the contract begins? Anochi Asher Toticha, Hashem Elokechem. I'm making a big deal about Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Elokechem, which is the same idea. It doesn't mean he's our God and no one else's God. He's everyone's God, but he's our boss. Remember, we're employees, not consumers. And therefore, Moshe emphasized that over and over again. Now with that background, what does the audience want to know? What were these laws? So look how it's right explicit now. Vizot means what's coming up. That's why it's red. What's coming up now in this speech is the mitzvah and the chumishpatim that God commanded me to teach you to keep in the land that you're going now to inherit. Look, compare these verses. Remember, in the story, what did God tell Moshe? You stay here with me in Har Sinai. I'll tell you the mitzvah chukim mishpatim, which you have to teach them and keep in the land. And what's coming up now is the mitzvah mishpatim, which God commanded me to teach you to keep in the land. And therefore, what's coming up is the laws that Moshe got on the first 40 days. Isn't that as obvious as could be? I'm trying to show you. It's explicit in Moshe's speech. The laws he's teaching, he received on Har Sinai in the first 40 days. I don't see how anyone could say anything differently. Moshe is screaming it in the speech. Now he throws in Musar again. Why should you keep these laws? So these laws will help you learn to fear God. I should have highlighted, this should be green. Hashem Elokecha. I missed that one. Okay. So you learn to fear Hashem Elokecha, to keep all of his laws. Not only these laws, all the other laws of Chumash, which God's commanding you. Okay. L'man Yeruchun Yamecha. Isn't Moshe saying that Arichut Yamim is on all the laws, isn't he? That's super clear now, isn't it? That the Man Yeruchun Yamecha is going on all the laws. And therefore, Shemati Yisrael, B'Shamarta Lasot, Asher Yitav Lecha. But remember, L'man Yitav Lach V'Rachti Yamim? Moshe is applying it not to Kibbutz Avim, he's applying it to the entire set of laws, isn't he? Man Yeruchun Yamecha, B'Shamarta Yisrael, B'Shamarta Lasot, Kasher Yitav Lach. Okay, Asher Tebun Me'od. Kasher Yibeh Hashem Elohei Avotecha Lach, Eretz Abat Chalav Udvash. That you're about to go to the promised land that God promised you. Keep these laws, you'll have a good life. Now, what should follow now? The laws. Before Moshe starts the laws, he goes back to his opening statement. Remember, these laws. Hashem Elokeinu Kratamon Brit B'Chorev. Who's Hashem Elokeinu? Remember, Shema Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hashem, our God, our covenantal partner, who made a brit with us at Har Sinai. He's everyone's God. He's the God of all humankind. That's the theme of Malchiot, isn't it? And it's the pasuk of Malchiot, which we make a big deal about once a year on Rosh Hashanah, and we remind ourselves every day, every morning and every evening when we say Shema. To understand why we say Shema every day, and its meaning, that it's a pledge of allegiance, not just a statement. It's not I'm saying I believe in one God. It's saying I understand that I'm chosen by that one God, the God of all humankind, the God of all creation. I'm chosen to serve him. And that's why I have more mitzvot than everyone else. I have an obligation, and I made a commitment to be a member of God's people forever, and I can't get out of it. Now, the first commandment's going to be love your job. Remember, give it 200%. Listen carefully now. In Pshat, what's that referring to? What are these Devarim referring to? Yeah, the laws of the speech, right? Which I'm commanding you today. And now comes a big line. What's that mean? The laws I'm about to teach you in this speech, what do they require?
Learning.
Not just learning, repetition. Shinun. These laws need constant repetition. Now, what are we going to find? We're going to find a set of laws. I'll close the screen for this. We're about to find an entire set of laws. What happened? Okay. We're about to find an entire set of laws in Sefer Devarim. And the purpose of these laws is to establish a nation representing God, land of Israel. These laws are so important and so basic, they need constant repetition. If you remember your P's and Q's, you might tell your children, remember to be polite. There's certain things you remember all the time. The laws of this speech are so important, they require constant repetition. Now, what are we going to call a set of laws that needs constant repetition? What's the word constant repetition? Shinun. So, Mishneh Torah is an instruction book that needs constant repetition. And that's the mistake everyone falls into. When Devarim is called Mishneh Torah by Sefer Devarim and by Chazal. Mishneh Torah doesn't mean a repeat of the first 4 books. Rather, Torah is a set of laws. The laws of Sefer Devarim that we got with the 10 Commandments on Har Sinai. And this set of laws needs constant repetition because they're the most basic laws of Chumash. They come with the 10 Commandments. They came 40 years ago, and they're the basics of becoming a nation representing God. They're so important they need constant repetition. And in theory, what should we study every day? All the laws of the speech. How do we solve the problem? That'd be too long. We'll see in a minute. We're going to do one little section in the beginning and one little section in the middle. They'll say we're going to be reciting every day the bookends of the HaMitzvah section, which is about your attitude to God. We'll see the first parsha of Kriyat Shema and second part of Kriyat Shema are going to be bookends of the HaMitzvah unit. We'll dedicate a whole share to that. What I'm trying to show you, and this is one of my crusades, is that if you want to understand your siddur, we say Shema every day, at least sometime in your Jewish education, study Sefer Devarim. In what context is Shema written? And if you don't understand the speech in Devarim and when these laws were given, you won't appreciate the depth of Shema and why Chazal picked it to be said every day, why it becomes a pledge of allegiance, and why it's the verse of Malchiot. In my opinion, this should be like core education in high school, but again, no one listens. Back to oh, we have to finish up in a minute, in 2
Can I
minutes.
ask a question about
Yeah,
that?
sure. Neshama, go ahead.
Is the approach you're using to teach us, is this like, since clearly it's new to some of us,
Well,
is it what are the words I'm looking for? Like widely accepted, and we just like have, whatever, ArtScroll or something that like uses a weird translation, or is this like not a common?
I think it's Pshuto Shemikra. And that's
Okay.
why I try to explain to you today. Just read it. That's what Chumash is saying. And so easy to prove because everything in this speech we don't find before. We didn't have Shema Vayim Shema beforehand in Chumash, did we? And Moshe isn't saying this in the 40th year. He's repeating it in the 40th year. This is what God told him 40 years ago. Now we're going to see, here's what gets confusing. As Moshe gives his speech, what does he do? He takes breaks and throws in some musar. Remember? He'll tell them, he'll be giving some laws. Oh, remember what happened to Miriam? You better be careful what you say. Remember, he's going to take experiences that happened during the 40 years. He said, remember what happened with Chet Egel and how bad you were? In other words, he's going to use the Jewish history as rebuke to motivate the people to keep the mitzvot, to remind them what happens when you don't keep them. But he's not teaching them laws they never heard before. He's adding rebuke they never heard before. Now, in order to be worthy of conquering the land, we'll see, what does Am Yisrael need to keep? These laws of Sefer Devarim. If we don't keep these laws, we're not going to get the land, because there's no point in being a Jewish nation in the land if we don't keep them. Moshe is going to say that over and over again in the speech. But what I want to show you, the laws in Devarim precede everything else. Now again, why it's not taught this way? I have no idea why. I just think it's simple. I think it should be taught this way. And as we study, if you can prove otherwise, more than happy. I think the main culprit is summer vacation in school. Because when do we read Sefer Devarim? Before Tisha B'Av. No, everyone's in camp, no one's in school anymore. By the time school starts, we're learning about the holidays, because it's right before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur.
So the Australians should be fine.
What?
The Australians should be fine.
But they follow all the minhagim. They keep, their spring holidays in their fall. Everything there's upside down.
Rav Leibtag, that just means you have to go to every single summer camp and teach Sefer Devarim.
The kids, we have lots of kids, hopefully, to teach it. There's a lot of teachers teach it this way now. It's so simple, it's so basic and simple. That's all. Again, I'd be more, if someone can prove me wrong, more than happy to listen to anything else. But you might have read so many articles about why Devarim is different, because it's the 40th year, and now they're about to go into Israel, and all this stuff like that. And this is Moshe's take on what Moshe says explicitly. These laws are directly from God, right? And these laws were given 40 years ago.
But
The
Rabbi
question is going to
Leibtag-
be what laws come after Chet HaEgel, and what they change. Now, why Moshe teaches the laws in their pristine form, right, and keeps and presents them the way they were taught before Chet HaEgel, that we have to deal with. Again, because these laws are principles and not practical laws. That's the idea of learning and studying and applying them. But because they came with the original 10 Commandments, we keep them the way they are. I'll give you an example. There's an American Constitution. You don't change the Constitution. What can you do? You can make an amendment. But you don't change the Constitution. If I have it right, the core set of laws doesn't change. I might not follow the Constitution, but I don't change it. I make an amendment. Why do I make an amendment? Because all of a sudden women have the right to vote. So I need an amendment. Remember that one? I make an amendment about, what do you call it? There's all, American law, how it goes. If you remember, studied constitutional law. But there's a break, a covenant of a people, right? To establish a nation. There's the core covenant in the beginning, and then there's amendments that come up later on due to events that happen. And with using that model, you can explain lots of laws in Chumash. I've been bringing an example from American law because every law system works that way, and Chumash shouldn't be any different. It's a natural progression of law. Yeah, Rashi?
He said that the 40 years in the desert, the 38 years they were learning Torah. What were they learning if this was on the back burner?
They probably learn it. I'll steal next week's class. Look at the first line of the book. Okay, the first line of the book is introducing the book. Elah Devarim. I didn't share my screen. My mistake. Share. Yeah. The first line of the book. What's coming up in this book? This is the opening line of the book. Are the Devarim? Remember, Abayu Hadram Eshonach Mitzab Chayim Ad Lavavecha is referring to the speech, which Moshe taught Bnei Yisrael now in Ever Yarden. When else did he teach these laws? In the Midbar, in the Arava. Well, he said he taught these laws in all these places, and especially on the 11-day journey from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. Now, what happened in Kadesh Barnea? We should have gone to Israel in Kadesh Barnea. That's when we sent the spies. So during the 11-day journey from Har Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, which should have been the journey of about to enter the land, what did Moshe drill every day and every night? The laws of Sefer Devarim. Okay? But now in the meantime, that would be the first speech. Why it's been 40 years? That's why he's going to focus on the sin of the spies. But now in the 40th year, on the 11th month, on the first day of that month, Moshe tells these things one last time to the people. But this is, and when he finishes this speech, he's going to make a covenant. He's going to say we have to write them in stone in Harival. There'll be lots of laws that apply to the 40th year. But the first thing he says, these laws are about to be applicable finally, after we finally start winning some victories. Again, we'll do this already when we studied the first speech over the next coming weeks. But do you understand why I can't understand these opening lines if I didn't read chapter 5 first? So this is the introduction. I'll show you. This is everything I'm telling you is Ibn Ezra and Ramban. Eidah Devarim, they hold are referring to the main speech in chapter 5. Got it? Rashi says Devarim are tochachot. He says Devarim are not the laws. Ibn Ezra and Ramban say these are the laws of the main speech. Rashi says these are the tochachot. These are Devarim, like rebuke. Remember, Hashem? And again, we'll explain why, the reason for the machloket, because both sides are right. I'm just giving you an example that you need to understand chapter 1. I need to understand what happens in chapter 5. Okay, it's fine. And the problem is, it's very hard to teach this in one class, because first I break the point, but you have to prove it because people are startled. Just all you have to do is read the book and study the book, and you'll see everything fits perfect. And then when you understand it this way, it solves all the problems of biblical criticism in a second. You don't need an animamin book and stuff like that to prove that it's okay to have stirot. Okay? It's nice that, but when you begin with the assumptions of the Bible critics realize that Devarim is different than the other books. So what do they say? They say it's later, and they say they come up with these crazy theories. But they're missing. By the way, the new theories, this is called D. The new theories say D came before J. If you know the alphabet, what they do, little by little, they're realizing that the laws of Devarim actually precede the other laws of Shemot and Vayikra. But that's the new kfir they're coming up with. But again, the problem is the assumptions the Bible critics make lead them to the wrong conclusions. But their analysis is right on the mark. There's differences, but I'm giving a much logical reason for the differences. Okay. Again, once you assume Moshe is reviewing the first 4 books, and you have all these things, once you realize it's a separate set of laws, it's not a repetition, but it's the original set of laws, all the questions fall apart. And all I showed you, everything I just told you, I'm just quoting Moshe Rabbeinu in his speech. That's all. Okay, anyway, we're over time a little bit, so we'll stop here. And the next week we'll get into detail. Okay, I'll send you a